Good evening and welcome to the Erving Select Board meeting for April 28th, 2025. Calling the meeting to order at 6:35 p.m.
I'm going to jump right into it, Jim, and since we all see that Jake is unable to make it this evening, I'm going to make a motion to nominate you as chair for tonight's meeting.
I will accept that nomination. Does it have to be done as a second and a vote?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So I'll second it. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Okay, first order of business, discussion on a request from the Historical Commission to reduce membership and establish a second committee to oversee the museum. May I have a member from the Historical to come to the table?
Start with one chair, see if we need more discussion. We made Bryant aware after our last meeting that we did take a vote to decrease the size, to ask the selectmen to put this before the town to decrease the size of the commission because it's hard to get enough people for a quorum and because just about every other commission in town has that smaller size. We also have been discussing over the past several months the use and care of the Care building. We talked a little while back. I mean, I think if we go back 2 years, there was a thought process and an intention to make the commission more in control of the budget for the building. Since then, we've been paying the electric bill, but that's about it. And the membership is divided in how involved we want to be with the building. Because generally a commission under the Mass laws does not have a museum, we want to have further discussion, put it before the board to, instead of having responsibility for that building within the Historical Commission, to have a different subcommittee under the selectmen and have the remaining Historical Commission doing the statutory duties that we're intended to do. Right now, that includes holding a historic building study. It means we're available for consultation when things come up in town. More administrative than physical, I think you'd say. We have members who are very interested in the collection that's already in the building, have been working to catalog it, and if we reduce the size of the Historical Commission, I think we'll be able to have two groups that are able to focus on their primary areas of interest.
Thank you for that explanation. It's very detailed and informative. It's good to. So, Scott, your thoughts?
Sure, I got some thoughts. I appreciated Terry had sent over an email on behalf of a few members. Thank you for that. It was prior to me seeing the. I hadn't gotten the packet yet for tonight's meeting, so I got a pre-read of what was going to be the potential language that could go into a special town meeting warrant for discussion at town floor, and I think most of the bullet points, if not all of them, were incorporated. However, the roles and responsibilities that go into the warrant don't have to be as detailed, and they should be more generalized. So the other email was a little more specific, which is nice, because then you can have other working documents that really hone in on the focus and the key. I don't think I won't speak for Jake, he's not here. You can chime in if I'm wrong. I don't think anybody on the board had any concern with either of these happening. It was the formality of getting it in writing that the request was done on the behalf of the active members in the Historical Commission of what they were choosing to have put forward to the voters. So now that that's done, we have the basis behind it, saying you have a 7-member panel or commission that's saying this isn't working and here's how we'd like to make it go forward so we can work effectively. I don't see an issue with it. I was reading through the language that you provided for us related to the potential town meeting warrant. It's thorough. It has it all in there. So it's just a matter of timing of whether or not we can obviously we'll have to do a couple of reads because we're going to be creating there's several items that we may need a special town meeting for prior to June 30th. So we, in theory, could have this done this fiscal year so that it's up and running and ready for July 1 after when the terms, turn over anyways. That would be my hope. We get it done in the next 60 days, roughly. I don't have a concern with it, and it's just a matter of tweaking the language. And if there's anything that you all see in the draft language as we're working through it over the next couple of months, well, it won't be for the next month, because we'll need a few weeks to post it and get it out there to the voters before we hold the meeting. Reach out, let us know, and have that conversation. It's pretty straightforward.
Maybe I can send the draft language to the committee for your next meeting, and you can review and discuss whether or not you have requested adjustments or feedback.
Sure.
Yeah, it aligns very well with the memo that was sent to me, or was sent to the board at my request. So I don't think there'll be a lot of concerns, but I'm not the one on the commission, so I'll leave that out to you all to take a look at that and figure out if there was something that was missed. But that being said, I don't have a concern with it. Let's put it in the queue as 2 of the items that will end up on a special town meeting warrant by end of year.
The only thing I can add to that is how'd you steal my thoughts?
Because we already talked about them like two or three different times that we were on board with it. So
No, I am in sync with Scott, and I will also say I cannot speak for Jake, but to me, this is a very practical solution to some identified problems, and with people who are uniquely passionate about the 2 things, it makes sense. So I'm in agreement. So if you could take that step to forward it to them, I think
I'll do it. Excellent.
we can move it. And
Yeah.
like Scott said, if we can get it done and ready to take effect July 1, that'd be great.
I'll send it off tonight.
Let's have another potential new member I've been squeezing, so we'll see how that works.
excellent.
Send them our way.
Hey, hopefully when all this works out on July 1, we can have 2 full committees that really want to take on those respective roles, and we'll go from not being able to get a quorum of 7 to getting 10 members on 2 different committees, fully vetted and ready to go. So that would be ideal.
Love
Great,
parts.
thank you.
Anything else?
Appreciate you
Well,
coming
I
out.
appreciate all of your time. Thank you for coming down.
We understand nobody wants to sit through an entire select board meeting if they don't have to.
Okay. Next order of business, to review and discuss proposed amendments to the sewer use regulations. Pete?
Give me a second to scroll back up.
So we did receive the memo from you in our packet. Do you want to just review it for the listening audience and bring us up to date?
For the possible sewer fees?
Yeah.
Okay. So I did some research with surrounding towns. They base their sewer rates on water usage. And what they do is they calculate usage from October through to April 1st. Why they do that? Because it's the winter months. You can't really account for water that people are using to fill pools, wash cars, water lawns, gardens, etc. So I got the most recent section from October 1st to April 15th, actually, is what it came out to. And what I did was I took the total usage for this end of town, the water usage, which was 14,824,607 gallons. You divide it by 1,000 gallons because our rate's per 1,000 gallons. And then I came up with the amount of, after multiplying it by the 530 per 1,000, came up with 78,570 and change. And then if you divide that by the number of counts, which is what Scott was kind of going with, and it comes out to 274.72 per account.
Okay. you had mentioned in there about multifamily and commercial. So I just want to bring that up because I do have some thoughts on that, but I want to hear if there's anything else you want to add related to that.
Yeah, I had mentioned that, just off the top of my head, what we could do for multifamily houses with a single apartment. We do have a commercial property that's multiple apartments. And it would be, of course, up to the commissioners what you want to charge extra per unit. You could do an extra 25 per unit as a base, or however you want to set up. You could set it up. There's really only one commercial apartment type spot in
Right.
town.
The rest of the commercial are just businesses per
Right.
se. They're not rental units for residential
Correct.
units. So I'm just wondering if, and these are all just working through this now, thinking through the math. Instead of dividing it by the number of accounts, or number of meters, I think it was,
Correct.
which is you had it on here.
286.
Thank you.
286, yep.
If we know the number of users, and I
Mhm.
don't mean users as in, if you know that the one commercial is 40 units,
Mhm.
and you know the number of multifamily that are, 2, 3, 4, 5 units using it, we can add those additional units to the whole matrix of number of actual users as opposed to the number of invoices that we send out.
Okay.
And it gets a better approximation of each household that uses that total, because that total number is for the conglomerate of all use.
All metered that we
All metered that
payable
we do.
accounts. Correct.
And I'm wondering if, because we're an anomaly, so we sort of have to get a little creative on how we do this. If we broke it out and we said there's commercial, non-living status commercial,
Mhm.
for retail and industrial, and that's one thing that we do. We pull those out of the total amount and we handle those differently. I don't know what different means at this point on that.
Yep.
But if you're looking for that versus the amount of gallons used by all units, all rental units or homes that are owned or rented or what, any living unit, it'll be greater than 286 because you'd factor in any multifamily or whatever. So you're actually going to bring down the per unit cost a little bit more.
Mhm.
And then you'd have to use that same factor to bring it back into, say, this is a per household unit. And if you have a 3-family, then you can expect your bill to be for one for each unit. If you have so your dollar amount changes and it doesn't shift the burden. It shifts the burden per unit that you own instead of per meter.
Okay.
I guess the pushback is 40 units or 5 units or 3 units uses more than the typical single-family unit.
Right.
So splitting it evenly amongst meters sort of disperses a 40 unit across the other 285,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to allowing, because I'm sure that usage is far higher for those 40 units than my single-family home or your single-family home or.
So, question, so would it be the assessor I would maybe be able to find out? Because there are
Yeah.
apartments that have 1 meter, dual apartments, some are 2.
So the
Assessors.
challenge that Pete is running into is that the utility database that was set up to track for the water has additional fields, but because you've never charged a sewer rate and you weren't charging
We've
these
never
things,
populated those fields.
those fields
Right.
are
Yeah.
not filled yet. So we would have to work with the assessing office.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm
using
not
the
sure
copy
that this
record card.
methodology is even one that we
Mhm.
want to go down that path. I'm just sort of,
Right.
because this is new and
Mhm.
we're talking about, creating something from nothing.
Right.
And we can't just take a cookie cutter, here's what the other surrounding 10 communities do, because none of them are set up the way we are.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to, spitball and come up with ideas of how to assess that breakdown of the total usage in an equitable way.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that thought that I had about, parsing it out by the number of units is feasible. I don't know if that works. I don't know what that does to the numbers. It's a trial and error. We can, I'd be happy to shoot you an email with a little more detail on what I was thinking. I can CC principal assessor on that and you,
Yeah.
and just have a conversation about, maybe for a follow-up presentation of what would those numbers look like if we were to break it down, not by the number of meters, but by the number of users.
So do you want to factor out town-owned buildings also? So, because they get bills, we get one at the highway, we get one at the police, the fire, the school, etc. Everybody gets a bill.
Because the enterprise funds.
Yeah, and I don't want to factor them out in the sense that they don't have a bill.
Right.
They're going to get a bill as well.
Correct.
But how we calculate that might be a different
To the
rate,
house.
a commercial rate versus a residential rate. Do you know if any other towns for their sewer rates have a tiered system for commercial versus?
I think I know of two that probably do it different for commercial. But
And I'm not saying, if nothing else, even if the per gallon, or per 1,000 gallon rate is the same,
Yep,
parsing those out, because the commercial business that their use is going to skew the numbers of total gallons used versus, so they're in a different pool. So if you're adding up the total number of gallons used, you're doing it in pockets. Even if the per 1,000 gallons is still 530, even if we don't do a tiered system, you're putting the pockets of use into categories and you're dividing them up that way.
So the utility database is not going to have this level of data in it yet, but we could do a data extract based on the report that you were already referring to by the user accounts, sort by address. We then can ask the assessing office
How many of these
for
are?
an extract, try to match up the addresses and pull in the unique data that is missing from the utility side to give you the ability to do the comparisons that you're talking
Right.
about.
Right.
So I think if we meld the two database extracts together, we should be able to get something closer. There's still going to be some one-offs that we're going to need
Sure.
to deal with,
Yeah.
but maybe we can identify other categories that are easier to analyze, and then identify maybe the more anomaly-like items that need further either research or further reflection.
Yeah, so it's not going to change, even if I'm not proposing to change the 530 or even the 14.8 million gallons. That is the use.
Right.
correct.
That's the same. It's how is that distributed into what pockets of, and then does that lead? It's more of an exercise of futility. It's really just figuring out, if we break it all out and we run all the numbers and we break it out into different categories, do we still come up with an average bill of 272?
Right.
Or is it not, because per user changes that rate? And I just really want to be able to have that conversation, so we're looking at it from all angles before we just say, that looks great, let's implement it. I'm not sure. Ultimately, I might say, thanks for doing all that, and the first thing you proposed back on April 28th was the one we go with. I don't know.
Right.
I just don't want to not look at it. And
Because our apartment complex is all off 1 meter,
correct.
so.
That's, and that's what I'm talking about is there are several hundred meters that don't have multiple units attached to them, or, commercial use attached to them, and sort of flatlining the total usage through the meters puts that as some at a disadvantage and some as an advantage fiscally. So I just want to see if there's a way we can sort of have a more even distribution or disbursement of how that water was used, and how that translates to a wastewater rate.
Okay.
So I think we were looking at the same concerns, maybe coming from different angles. So let me just start by saying thank you for this body of work. It, very, very good information and very workable. So one of the questions that I had was, in your example, you did mention extra 25 per apartment. Is that just for people to know that, where it's coming from? Is that based on an industry best practice or a standard, or is that just based on you as our resident, topic expert, based on your projected use and knowledge? That sounds like an approximate number. Are we?
The number 25 is what I came up with. There are some other towns they charge, but it's more than that. I mean, even if what I put together here in this memo, what it would come out to is still compared to most towns, because like Scott said, we are unique.
We are. No doubt.
We'd still be 1,000 to 1,500 more than less than our surrounding towns.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
I
by
mean,
far, yeah.
by far.
Correct.
So, the 25 I thought was a cautious amount. I know in some other towns it's way more than that.
Okay, and that's good. It's really, like I said, I'm asking the question
Right.
mainly for the taxpayers who are, and our residents, our property owners.
Correct.
I was thinking the same thing, to have a flat across the board fee for 286 users. How does that affect the widowed elderly person that does one load of laundry per week, that makes 3 cups of tea per day, as opposed to
Right.
the family of 7 next door
Mhm.
that has kids involved in sports and is doing laundry every night and is boiling 6 quarts of pasta? Or, just I'm trying to figure out a way to balance, and maybe Scott's suggestion helps get us to that, and even in terms of not just multi-unit, like 3-unit apartments, 4-unit apartments, 40-unit apartments, but is there a way to consider residences that now have ADUs in consideration as well, where you're not, it's still a single-family home, but you've got that in-law apartment, so there's additional users there. And I mean, I know it's a lot of work, but to try and tease it out and pull it all together, but I think it gives our end users, our customers, a better basis of understanding to know, yes, this is new to us, and yes, and it's additional charge. It's a lot less than what your neighbors are paying in other towns, but we still put a lot of forethought into it and reasoning and rationale to get where we're at. We didn't just, do this and
Right.
throw the dart, if you will. So again, I think this is great workable information, and like Scott, I'd just like to tease it out a little bit more and spend the time to get something really substantive.
Right, and this is, we're still on the same track. I
Yep.
just want to be sure. This is for town-wide, so we're still trying to figure out the flat
So,
fee.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to figure out the most accurate per unit use
Okay.
cost. If we're going to use this as the factors that we use to create the average bill, how do we then roll that? I want to show that what Jim had just mentioned, that the thought process that went into how we came up with the rate, how we came up with the breakdown of
Sure.
usage, and then how that got applied to the subsequent bills that go out. So
Okay,
You can get that ready for your next meeting.
Thank you.
yeah, and I'll put together an email. I'll CC you, and I'll just touch base before the end of the night just to
Yeah.
get my thoughts. Make sure you and I chat again before the
We
end
can
of the
schedule
night.
time this week to pull the data and start figuring out how to analyze the two together.
and check with Jackie.
We'll get it from Jackie.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, that's who it'll come from.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you so much.
There was
Yep.
one more, I made a mistake as we were starting this meeting. There was one more memo that Pete had in the packet
Oh,
related to the water department.
Yeah.
And there was a specific the last bullet in particular was something that Pete and I were working on. And it is in response
The
to
file?
the file of authorized contractors to work on the system.
Yeah, I did see this one. I was reading through it. I'm assuming this is a work in progress.
Yeah.
I don't know of all the sub-bullet points that would need to be in there, but the current certificates of insurance and copies of hoisting license, if there's additional, I don't know. I'm not posing that as if I anticipate there's additional. We haven't really exhausted what would be the criteria that we would require from each contractor.
Right.
So as I read that, that's the first thing that popped up into my mind is what is the totality of what you would want as the superintendent for the requirements for a contractor to do the jobs that we have them, applying for their permit to do in our town, the connections and,
Right.
So just, I don't know what those additional, if there are any, maybe it is just a hoisting license and their certifications.
One thought after you and I spoke, because this largely reflects the conversation that we had,
Right.
that last bullet. But one thought I had, and I was thinking about some experiences that Glenn and I have had on some projects where we've had the unfortunate experience of a vendor not being responsible and having to document the fact that we had a very poor vendor experience, and that in future projects that vendor cannot be considered to work on town equipment. And so I do wonder if there's, as we flush out this process, if there's some way to give either discretion either to the superintendent or to the water commissioners to, if there was a very bad experience with a vendor working on the water system because of how vital this it's critical infrastructure, so how vital this is, that there could be a denial to be an approved vendor on the system based on that experience.
I don't see why not. I would agree that there's some, I believe when we talked about this, that the responsibility of approving those applications or for who could do the work was going to fall on the superintendent.
That was what I recall.
That's
Right.
was my recollection. I don't see why we wouldn't also give that the same purview of saying there's a denial capability as well. We use a similar, or we have used a similar stance when we have deemed a bid for a job as non-responsive based on prior work history or prior bidding. That they're not a responsible party, so we're going to pass over their bid in totality and not even accept it. So we use that same methodology now, not for that specific
Right.
job, but that
Right.
that principle alone.
Right. I just didn't want to, if you all like that, I just didn't want it to sound like as long as you gave us these documents, you're approved to work on the system.
Correct. If you've given us those documents, and 4 previous times we've had to go back through and had a subsequent contractor come in and fix the mistakes you've done,
Right.
I'd rather we not hire them or have somebody hire them again to do the work.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
So, if we're trusting our water commissioner as a subject matter expert to make approvals, really, it has no meat if we don't also, it's a paper tiger document. If, you have the approval to rubber stamp, but you have no teeth to say, no, I have to disqualify you. I would just say, absolutely, we have to document the reasons why.
Yes.
And,
Right.
Correct.
and do the due diligence of the process, but absolutely, there is nobody that knows this system better than you. And if you came to us and said, I have legitimate, or even, I had legitimate concerns after the fact that this person, this entity, I disqualified for these reasons. You just admitted
Right.
you're the person to make the best educated decision. So, one other question I had about this in that last bullet point is about where the files would be kept, one or both. I guess my question is, if there has to be hard documents with wet signatures on them, I would recommend they be kept in a fireproof safe wherever we keep all of our other sensitive documents. I'm assuming that would be at the town hall, but my follow-up question to that is, in 2025, Can these not be kept digitally where both entities could have instant access to them?
So we do
Sure.
have, we already have a shared server, so that is possible.
Okay.
We wouldn't necessarily put that onto the website. It wouldn't be, I don't think, necessary.
No,
But I believe what we've seen from our peer towns is that they have like a PDF document that gets posted to the web for any community member to see. That says who the vendors are, what their contact information is, the basic information that they would need to know that they're approved and available. So,
Yeah, I think working this out a little bit further is the next step. Once we figure out what are the requirements we want somebody to have, what are some of the potential disqualifiers that somebody could be disqualified for being put on the list, and then actively going out and seeking people to, companies to get onto the list. So it's great to have the categories of what puts somebody on there, but if we don't have anybody to tell, I think it would be easier for our residents to not have to go out and seek out if they already have a list of,
right.
8, 10, 12 people that have said, yeah, I do this type of work. I have no problem. Those qualifiers that you need, sure, throw me on the list.
Right.
Here's my paperwork.
Exactly.
Here's my qualifications. So if anybody in your town, I could be one of your 10 or 12 vendors,
Right.
or 25. I don't, however,
Right.
I don't know how
Off the top of my head, I know there's 5 that
actively.
predominantly have done work in
Right.
town, so.
So it'd be reaching out to them, plus any others saying, we're just
Sure.
formalizing a practice that we already do, but we need to formalize it and put it in writing.
Mhm.
So.
Exactly. Excellent.
How much time do you think you would need to sort of flesh out those little
I
nuances?
know you all haven't set your next meeting date yet. I think that's a topic for tonight. But I think we can have it for your first
Good.
meeting in May.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
okay.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
While Pete's here, do you want to hit the other wastewater or water items farther down the agenda?
What did I miss? I thought we,
Let's see.
Second one under new business.
okay.
The asset management.
Yes.
Yes,
Can I find that
okay,
number?
so discussion regarding Mass DEP Asset Management Planning Grant for the water system.
Section 7, yes.
Thank you for reminding me.
Sorry about that.
No?
Let's see.
All right.
So I don't know if you all recall us applying for this last summer.
I do not.
So long ago.
It was a long time.
I believe
Yes.
when you came up to talk to Brian prior to a meeting, I don't know, last month or earlier
Yeah.
this month,
Right.
I heard and went, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember that. But I digress.
That's how much has gone on in the
Yes,
last
it's
year.
been quite a while
Right.
since this has happened.
It's been, close to a year.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised I at least vaguely remember it.
Kudos to you. 'Cause
I just remember FinCom sitting over there saying, if there's a chance to get a grant for this, then we should try.
yeah.
All
And
right.
that's the last conversation I remember about
Yeah.
this.
Right.
And lo and behold, we got the grant.
So,
And their language is unnecessarily confusing. So
Of course
they
it
use
is.
the language borrower throughout the documents, but it is a grant. I did message them again to ask and clarify. They just use the same language in an attempt to be inclusive to both the borrowers and the grant recipients. But this is a grant. It comes with a 20% match on the funding for the appropriation the town must do, and then a 20% match that comes from staff time. So it's very much structured just like the asset management plan that we did for the
Yeah.
wastewater side. If we're to go forward with this, we need to have documentation of your commitment to move forward in June. We have to get the application materials ready and submitted prior to October, otherwise we lose the award.
Right.
And then you have until 2026 to finish the work.
2026.
okay, and in terms of funding, has this been budgeted for?
We did not, because we didn't have this during the budget cycle,
Sure,
and just
I
got this award after we closed the budget.
Yep.
This is not currently in the FY26 plan. So this would, if you choose later tonight to call a special town meeting, this would likely be something I would suggest is an item to bring to the voters. Water retained earnings has sufficient funding
Yeah.
to be able to cover this amount.
Okay.
And we only need to cover it's not a reimbursable, so we only need to cover the matching of the 23.
It is a reimbursable, but you only have to budget the amount that is requested, the 20%.
Yeah.
That speaks to that conversation we were having earlier this year when we were talking about the stabilization funds, and keeping the retained earnings in the account helps us with the cash flow.
So we can flow it out and then
Exactly.
flow it in. Okay.
Well, yeah.
And we did that this year with the lead service line project.
Yep.
That was a reimbursable, also through DEP and through the same process. So we would spend the money out, we would do a drawdown request to get the reimbursement and put
Okay.
it back into the water fund.
And currently, when you say we have enough, we have enough for the totality of it while we wait for reimbursement.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Actually, this project scope and size is similar to the lead service line project.
Yep.
So, bottom line, if I'm understanding it correctly, there's 23,500 rounding up of in-kind services that have already been budgeted through labor. There's an additional 23,000 that we didn't budget for, but we'll have to pay for. So for the key takeaway, that we'll be getting $118,000 worth of value out of coming up with 23,500
Yes.
worth of money that we haven't yet budgeted for, but we do have the money to pay for.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay,
Just hasn't been appropriated. Correct.
sure,
Right.
but
Yep.
if the, so, I
And
guess,
if we pass on this, which you can, it's just a grant award. If you did want to do it and the voters said no, at this point, I think our only concern is that DEP had suggested that we do this project, which is why we sought it. And our experience with DEP is things that our recommendations become requirements. So
They typically do.
mandated.
They-
This is mandated.
we've
so-
been voluntold to do it,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
gonna pay for it if we
Yep,
understand.
don't kill the
this.
messenger.
right.
No, not at all, not at all, sir, not at all. But
Yeah,
I-
and typically, these type of things, with the thoughtfulness of the amount of money we're saving by doing it this way and
Right.
getting it done before it becomes a mandate with a deadline, we won't have an issue,
Right.
typically.
So I'm in favor of it, and I say we move it forward to the STM agenda and
Okay.
ask the town to support it.
Yeah.
Sounds
And
like the STM is happening.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is Article number 3 on the
On the
Yeah.
potential
projected, on the
STM.
potential SDM that we said we weren't sure if we're going to have.
So let's
that
put
we're gonna
air
have.
quotes around potential
Got it.
Yeah.
air
Air quotes, yeah.
Okay.
And relatively soon, obviously, because we're going to need it.
For
This
June
has
30.
to be done and be able to send off the memo by
In
June
June.
30.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Excellent.
So I guess we will put that on an agenda, though we require a letter of support, you said? So
There's some template language that they've used in the
Mhm.
past with us. So now that I have an indication from you all that you want to accept, I will ask them if there's a formal version. I saw a few different versions of it. So I'll ask which one they specifically want to see on record. There was one that you did as a resolution vote in the past, so I brought that very formal language and you voted that through. So if they want that again, I'll prepare that in advance and have it for an upcoming meeting. And then for documentation of the appropriation, it's simply just town meeting vote. I get something
Yeah.
from this clerk, so
Saying that we got the money.
that's it.
All right, anything else I missed? Thank you for reminding me about that last item that we
I think
missed.
that was it for Pete.
Yeah,
Anything
that
else,
was
sir?
the big item.
All right, well, thank
Okay.
you.
Well, thank you.
Okay, we are going to move on to discussion regarding the Church Street Bridge and project and easement status. Item number 9. Glenn?
Poor Glenn.
Poor Glenn?
Actually, he's used to all this. So he's used to all this. So
How is-
I can handle the Church Street one if you want.
Yeah, but sit tight because we're going to need you for the
We
next
need
one.
you for all three. So Church Street Bridge, we are very, very close. We are at 100% design with MassDOT. They finished all the environmental permitting with our engineers, so that work's done. And Glenn has taken the lead on helping me work with all the property owners to secure the easements that we need. So we have 4 secured, and we're working on the last 2. So we're getting very, very close. The last two are seeking appraisals. The cost associated with that is just over $10,000, which requires multiple quotes. But in the essence of time, because we're trying to keep our June advertising date, I'm asking the board if you would feel comfortable pre-authorizing one of us to be able to award to the lowest bidder. We've reached out to 3 firms to be able to do the work.
I don't have a problem with that.
I have no problem at all, so you'd be looking for a motion to authorize you to proceed?
Yeah, give me 30 more seconds or less and
I
you'll
saw
have
that pen
it.
moving quickly.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, there's a couple of pieces I want to make sure I have in there.
I assumed as much, but.
And then once we have the appraisals and the review appraisals back, then we'll have documentation, obviously, for the 3 of you, but the documents to provide the appraisal values to the property owners who are asking for them. And then you all can discuss how to proceed.
Yeah. Other than the not to exceed 15, you think that's sufficient for the 3 of them?
Based on the first of the 3 quotes, the need that I got back, yes.
Okay. Anything else you need in there? I'll make it if you can offer any friendly amendments if I miss anything. I'm
got
going to
it.
make a motion to authorize Brian Smith, Town Administrator, to award a professional services agreement for appraisals on parcels related to the Church Street Bridge project, not to exceed $15,000 for any responsive and responsible vendor. Do you need anything else?
I will second that. Any other discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Hate to see those three items be the ones that hold this project up. It's been going on
We're
for far too
so
long.
close.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
years and years.
Yes.
I did just want to point out to you, and we don't have to necessarily take care of this tonight, but I want to just call attention that the borrowing authority that was approved back in 21 has not been executed yet.
Right.
Largely because we were successful in getting the project transitioned over to the state. They're going to be picking up the construction. But we do have a few $100,000, approximately 3, that need to be covered, that are costs for the design phase, the permitting phase, that's been going on for all these years, that shows as a deficit in the fund because it hasn't been borrowed yet. So I either need the 3 of you to meet with the treasurer and talk about at least executing that portion of the borrowing and making that 0 again, or consider asking the voters at town meeting just to transfer from available funds, say in stabilization, to again make that 0.
The proposed special town meeting.
The proposed special town meeting that
Yeah.
sounds more and more like
Article number 4 on the proposed special town meeting.
just because we don't want to continue to carry a deficit into the next
Correct.
fiscal year.
Yeah, and I think that conversation is going to the outcome of that will be contingent on what is the total dollar that we've spent over the years. And
Correct.
so
And I'll get
just
that
having
final
that
number for you.
conversation, having if the treasurer wants to come to our next meeting and
Okay.
you know, with the options, what is the total amount to
Yep.
date? What's the anticipated,
Right.
between, I think this would be the last piece, correct?
Yeah, it was, well, the other, because we had talked about rescinding the borrowing authority several years ago, and I think it was actually Selectman Benbury who suggested keeping it open just in case the bids came in wildly different than what the estimates were. So I don't know that we need to make any more of a contribution. The bid, or the estimated cost has increased over time, but it sounds to date that the federal and state
Is
partners
covering
are planning to cover it. So it's my understanding that once this officially goes out to bid, the project transitions over to the state side.
And they absorb.
So it's the costs from design through permitting, preparing the bid documents, getting it to that level.
Okay.
So, but I can get you that final
I
cost.
think my predecessor was very wise to recommend holding on to that for
Yeah,
now.
just in
depending on
case.
that, if it's a small
Um,
borrowing, great. If not,
Okay.
we'll figure it out.
If we have the capital to pay for it responsibly and not expose ourselves to any type of risk of not having that for something larger. We still have the resources. I'm in favor of paying as opposed to borrowing to keep the bottom line costs lower. But I think we can move forward having the discussions with the treasurer
Okay.
and then bringing it to the town.
So I will speak to the treasurer, ask her to meet with our financial advisor and come up with the different options for you. We'll get that ready for your next meeting.
Thank
Excellent. Thank you.
you. Okay.
Now we can go on to Farley, I believe.
Now, speaking of bids that came in much higher than anticipated, the Farley Bridge construction project.
Yeah, it's kind of a disappointing email
Yeah.
last week when Gill Engineering had estimated around $128,000
Yeah.
to do the project. And it's a split between, Erving and Wendell. Wendell had taken the lead on this for the whole grant project. And when he sent the estimates back, that the two bids that came back at almost 360,000 and almost 333,000, almost 200,000 more, even than what the grant was, that was awarded.
Right.
And again, talk about not knowing and the cost of materials.
Right.
I did not expect it to be this much either.
We
Because
don't-
when we were originally down there walking, he had originally thought around 100,000 when we first started walking this project and looking at it.
Right. There wasn't a lot of competition in this particular procurement, which may or may not have had an impact on the closeness of the bids.
And square footage wise, it could be a small project for wherever these people are coming from also.
So they're coming from there. I mean, they could be mobilization costs, but I mean, I know everybody, both personal and commercial, everybody's costs have gone up.
Yeah.
I love using Mr. Hammock's references about, what it costs to get a gallon of milk these days. But, man, that's a lot of milk.
And again,
That's-
it doesn't serve Erving residents other than to get to Wendell for hiking stores. But, there's no residents on it. Pete has a pump station there, but don't need the bridge for that.
Right, so I guess we'll go back to a question or a comment that I made maybe a year or more ago is the most fiscally prudent thing to do is to put Jersey barriers across it and just close it to vehicle use. I mean, if it doesn't really serve us that well, what's the purpose of? And I'm not saying it's what I want to do, but I pose that question: is that an option?
I think there's a lot of residents that would say that they would want to try to see it fixed, just from what I hear around town. They love using the bridge.
I used it yesterday. Sure, it would be great, but
Yeah.
an extra 200K right now?
Split between the two towns and
Yeah,
not
I mean,
knowing
it's
what
anywhere
the
from
financial status is for Wendell.
Yeah, it's anywhere from 78,000 to 102,000, depending if you're talking about, appropriating the entire amount or just the delta from the grant awarding.
And I believe Phil was he was gonna reach back out to the awarding people to see if there was any more funds available. I haven't seen any more
I haven't had a
emails.
response.
Because it's already been awarded, there may not be any more
Mm.
additional funds to help.
Yeah, and I was gonna. My initial thought was, well, some of the small repairs that we continue to do, how much time does that buy us? However, these costs aren't going to go down.
The problem is the small repairs on top are covering up the major repairs that are needed under the substructure of it. It's the timbers that has more problems than the wear surface is what
Yeah,
they're
and
calling
my other question is, if we do nothing, and we say no, we can't afford it, and Wendell, I don't know what they would say, but if they said no, it's not part of our budget right now, we're going to hold off. At what point does MassDOT bridge inspection say, we are making the decision for you, this bridge is closed.
That same thing they did to Church Street.
Right.
They're just gonna come out one day and say,
They'll inspect it
done.
on their annual inspection and say, no, it was closed last year and it's no longer viable. Put some barriers up and it's done. And I don't know what that time frame is. I don't know. I don't remember when we discussed the status of that bridge, if they thought that was imminent.
We're actually ahead of that action. We just received a status
I see.
update a few months ago,
Yeah, a couple months ago, I think.
and we were already working, and our peers in Wendell had already received the grant funding by the time we got that report. So luckily we're ahead of where MassDOT is, but to your point, it is documented, it's known, it's going to
No,
continue to be
that's what I'm
monitored.
saying. I don't remember. I don't remember when they inspected it the last time. It was noted that it had some deficiencies,
Yep.
and that's what we're looking at fixing. I don't recall if they said if they gave like in their inspections.
Not
they
yet.
don't give
Not yet.
a thorough timeline of like based on our experience. You probably have
No.
3 to 5 years of
No.
life.
No,
They
won't
just
do that.
they do it as a matter of fact. In this moment, you're fine.
Yep.
Pass or
Right.
fail, and the next time I come out, it's in this moment you're not fine, and that's
Correct.
when you find out that it has to close
I'll get
immediately.
the phone call just like it did for Church
Right?
Street.
Yeah, it was good yesterday, and today
One-
it's
yeah,
not.
One way at single lane it now.
Yeah,
But obviously you can't do that with this bridge. This is gonna be a close.
I was gonna say it's a single lane anyways.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think they would derate it any more than what it already is.
Right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
next step would be to close it if it's
Yeah.
not fixed.
Well, that's why I posed the question is whether or not we want to close it. If we decide that we don't want to fund it, ultimately it's going to deteriorate to a point that DOT is going to tell us it's
Yes.
closed. Whether that's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. Speaking about whether or not we want to fund it, and you said you've heard people want to use it, I also think while we may not have residences on that road and it's not a direct link to our use, there is a link to our use as far as our residents using it to pass through.
Correct.
I also thought of it as a detour if there was ever an emergency on Route
True.
2. People have used that as a detour to get out of the area if they need to.
That's true.
It's not preferable. You can't detour large commercial, you can't detour large trucks, but you can detour cars
Passenger
if they
vehicles.
needed to, for a short amount of time. I'm thinking like, crashes and things on Route 2 where they're shut down and it's much more difficult to turn everybody around and tell them to head back the other way as it is to just shoot them up over the mountain and
Right.
down into Miller's, or vice versa, down into
Yeah.
Orange. So there is I don't want to say a need, but there is a use for it
Yep.
that makes sense. So having said that, I would be in favor of trying to find a way to fund it. I don't know where
Article 5.
or how or what pocket that would come from.
It would have to come from stabilization at this point.
Yeah,
I don't know that it makes sense to borrow $100,000.
I don't think so either.
So-
No. So I think this would be a well-suited conversation for our next meeting on whether or not we want to craft language.
And maybe at that point, we'll talk to Wendell prior to.
Yeah,
see
before we
where
put the
they
legwork
stand.
in. If they turn around, if their decision is we also want to do it, then I would say as a good neighbor, we should try and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, this was on April 22nd when we sent it, so I don't know how often they meet. So it's been a week already
I
since we
think they
sent it.
meet bi-weekly, so maybe they're meeting this week.
Yeah.
I did notify them that this was on your agenda for tonight.
I do agree that, we would want to be good neighbors, and again, just because I pose that as a potential consideration of shutting it down, I'm not saying that's what I want to do either. And I am all for being a good neighbor if we can afford it, but now again, we just talked about stabilization on the last bridge conversation. Now we're doing this, so is this something I believe it would make sense to put on the treasurer's radar as part of those conversations with our financial people and what makes sense to do, and now do we have 2 items for
Right.
consideration there.
I can,
So I know that Orange Fire accesses that bridge with the ambulance for the residents in Wendell on that side.
Thank you.
that's a good point.
It's an added component of being good neighbors. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, that would add quite a bit of drive time to get over there if they have to go the other way.
It did when it was closed.
Yeah. Valid point, thank you.
Thank you for adding that. Okay.
Are you okay with me reaching out to the select board's office in Wendell, saying that you're open to trying to find Irving's half of this?
I was gonna
If
ask
you're
if you
willing.
would.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm more than okay with it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm
And,
requesting.
and in the meantime, do you want me to forward this to Finance and Capital for consideration and a recommendation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Put it on everybody, the appropriate party's radar.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll get that one going too.
Yep,
I was in a good mood until that.
on to the next.
On to the next, okay. Glenn, thanks for staying. Review to a request to install additional guardrail on High Street, and then we will segue right into request install of speed cushions on North Street.
So the High Street guardrail request came from a concerned resident, and she's actually here tonight. So the
Thank you.
house sits below grade, way below grade. And with the extra traffic that's been going up and down High Street since the Swamp Road Bridge has been out, there's been a lot of concerns. So we have another proposal here for a guardrail to be repaired on Pratt Street. So I had the same company come out and give us a proposal for the High Street job. It's not a lot of money. I could pay for this one out of our contracted services line for this year, because the way our road painting is done in the fall now, so I'll have sufficient funds in it to take care of this if you all choose that this is the right way to go for this. I can, when you stand up there on High Street and you look at our property, you can definitely understand the concerns. Driving by it, I've worked in town now since 2008, plowed by it many times, and I thought, well, a house in a hole. But when you look at it from the homeowner's perspective and walk it and look
Yeah.
at it, you can understand the concerns.
No, I appreciated the pictures that you put in there. I wasn't 100% familiar with which location just based on address, but looking at it from the top of the hill around the mailbox status, looking down, yeah, you can clearly see as you increase the traffic because of the Swamp Road Bridge out, it wouldn't take much for a car to go off the road, and you've more than tripled the amount of cars going up and down that road, and I think it's a small price. It's around $3,000.
Around $3,000, yeah.
And if we're already going to mobilize them to come out here and do another project down on Pratt and River, I think it just makes sense to add it to it for safety reasons, especially if you already have the line item for
Yeah.
it. So I don't have any concerns with having it done.
No, I was very familiar with the property, and the photographs confirmed my belief that I knew what it was. And if I was the homeowner, I would share your concerns. I would hate to have an automobile require me to install a new roof, which could be the case. So
Very much so.
if we're already mobilizing them, bringing them out here, this to me is one of those common sense, no-brain decisions.
All right. I mean, since you have the funds for it, I don't think there's any official anything. I'd say it falls within your scope. It's not a capital project. It's under $5,000. Get
Okay.
it done.
I'll get it scheduled.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for bringing that concern forward.
I think we got one more for you, right, Glenn?
You do.
You do.
Back at the top.
Below that too, speed cushions.
Back at the top.
I know your thoughts.
Which,
So I think
The
it's
road opening. You
section-
had road opening up there also, if you had anything more for that.
We didn't get a response back from our attorneys yet, so I need to
Okay.
follow up with
Yeah,
them.
we're gonna pass
Pass
over.
over that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, we didn't mention that earlier.
No, that's fine.
I mentioned it to Brian on clarification before we called the meeting to order, just to make sure I knew what we were going to address and pass. So that will be scheduled for an upcoming, probably the May meeting.
Got to have the response soon, so
Alright.
I'm assuming it was just town meeting season that sort of slowed everything down.
Okay. So that then brings us to the request to install, or in this case, reinstall the speed cushions on North Street. That came in from a
Resident.
concerned resident.
Correct.
I guess I'll start with your thoughts on the matter.
Well, so prior to this all happened, we walked both streets with all the residents, and I gave them a lot of my concerns about the speeding between them, the noise, and I get why they all want it, believe me. I get why they all want traffic calming through there, whatever and however it can be done. And all the warnings that we had given them all about people speeding up in between them, after them, the noises of the thumps going over them, they all came true. When Mariah was here, she sent out a survey afterwards, and most of the people that were adamant about wanting them did not want them to come back. FERCog did a traffic count for them right before we took them out that fall time, and the data showed that people are actually going faster between them and after them than without them. I get the concern about the kids in the narrow roadway. I don't know what to say. I get their concern, but I also understand, everybody else's concern of the reasons why they don't want them also.
So we can all agree that the concern to address safety is
Absolutely.
paramount. But
100%.
this isn't solving the problem. This, you don't believe this,
It created,
okay,
faster traffic.
right.
It's in the data. And that data was showed, I believe, through the survey. Did Mariah send that data? Did we have it when the survey
Starting
was
to-
done?
All bleed together. There was, yes, we do have the traffic data. I know it was discussed at this table
Yeah.
back in the winter of 24, because it was the
Yes.
fall of 23 that they were in.
Yep.
So it was last winter that we looked at it. And you're referring to there was definitely cases of speeding in between. There was one, the most egregious, I want to say, was clocked at 70 miles an hour,
Mm-hmm.
which just doesn't even feel like that should be physically.
Forgive me if I don't have a surprised look on my face right now.
But it shouldn't be physically possible. But it's what was documented, and to your point, you've observed and others have observed where things like that will happen. We know as soon as the Swamp Road Bridge happened, to the conversation you were having on the last one, people who were being recalculated on different routes trying to get over to the forest or different ways to get through would speed up and down the streets, and you could hear people revving. So I think the concern that we have is the hope was that a physical barrier,
Mhm.
the speed cushions would serve as a physical impediment and slow folks down. The concern that Glenn expressed, we were very honest that there's a concern that people will be frustrated, and as a response to their frustration, may then operate in a less desirable way, and there were instances of that. So we don't want to exacerbate a problem.
No.
We also don't want to ignore a problem.
Yeah.
No,
So I do have, I have brought this up when we first started talking about the temporary speed cushions that they're temporary in the sense that they have to come out every winter.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can never put them back in the same spot because the way you have to tap them into the road, it has to be in a new location. So they truly are just a temporary measure that you put in.
Yeah.
And I had brought up the conversation back then about permanent speed bumps that are more of there's some in Amherst around UMass as you're going down the hill from the Rotary, but even more relevant of a setting or a layout is a flat road. It's actually called North Street in Northampton. It's outside of the Industrial Boulevard. It's a stretch of a residential road that people use as a cut through, which is very identical to what we have here. And I think in a quarter-mile stretch of what's the really dense populated, maybe a half mile, they have 3 or 4 of them. They're permanent, they're elevated, they're crosswalks. I'm sure, I can already see the gears turning about the plowing issues that come when you're going to do that. You've got to straighten your plow out. And
It's ice.
yeah, I mean, but what I'm saying is communities have them.
Yeah,
And
oh,
they put them up
absolutely.
there.
Old Deerfield has them.
And they have them, they're elevated, they're there, and there are other additional problems that may come with them, whether you need to angle them because there's a hill, so you don't want water depositing, so they have to run off, or you are doing them straight across with a drainage, port to allow for water to not accumulate. So there's all sorts of different variables. The reason I bring it up is I believe, are we not still looking at
Complete streets.
complete streets for that area?
So we've confirmed that the vendor that we were going to use is still approved by MassDOT for
Okay.
complete streets. You can still use your Chapter 90 funding, which was the identified funding source that capital planning presented to you all.
Right.
So we just need to finish that application, and the three of you can award that contract and begin that work now or in the next month or so. The goal would be to apply for construction funding, assuming they're going to keep their October round. So you're putting the application together for October. So that's a lot of work this summer with the residents to get the final proposal and the cost estimate, put the application in.
Yep.
But if it gets awarded, we're not doing any construction this year, it'll be construction next
It
year.
would be construction next year. And I think, knowing that, if that were the way we're going to go, which I think we should,
Yep.
I don't know if it makes sense from my standpoint, while I appreciate the concern of installing them for another season, if we are going to look at the plan of complete streets, I think there can be some calming measures that are part of that complete streets that are a permanent structure, that are a permanent change. Yes, I can already, my own brain is already saying, yeah, but, and if you had a quarter-mile stretch where there was 3 or 4 of those, everything before and after that is going to be a racetrack, especially if it's just been freshly repaved, and all of those concerns are going to happen. It's no different than we said, anytime you do a detour, you're just kicking the concern down another street,
Sending the problem somewhere else.
sending it somewhere else. That we're going to chase that problem of speeding cars on every single road. We chase it on Route 2 when they're going 90 miles an hour. We chase it on side streets. They go down my road at 35, 40. It's a 20 mile an hour zone. I mean, it happens.
You're
It's
being
everywhere.
generous.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
And there's 2 other complexities. The Church Street Bridge that we've been talking about for a number of years. And if everything goes right, we will hopefully be reopening it next year. So making a traffic adjustment today, well, that's still at half usage. When it's back open again, it will redistribute that traffic pattern.
How the traffic pattern goes.
And in some ways, some folks may appreciate that, and in other ways, there may be some concerns that come out of redistributing it back to the way it was.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have a solution that considers those impacts on Church Street and North Street.
Yeah.
And so I agree we could do something in the short term, but making a permanent decision until that engineering work's done and the residents have all weighed in on what that final result is, and you have one plan that you're going forward as a town, maybe short-sighted, and it's a lot of work to put them in, especially if the end result is actually harmful to others. I don't want to make light about any of these concerns.
Yeah.
No,
So,
go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, what I'm going to ask is if we could pull up the results, the data that we have that
From that traffic count?
from the traffic count that support what we're talking about tonight, as well as the survey results from the residents as a whole, so that we can address the entire neighborhood. I know there's, I'm sure, more than one other citizen who has expressed concerns about this problem as well. But I think, there may be a suitable long-term solution, but to address the safety component in the short term, whether, have to ask what other type of holistic fixes, short-term fixes, Band-Aid fixes could we have? I mean, is the PD, would a discussion with the chief, I don't know what their bandwidth is like, because, as I said, Scott's neighborhood, this is a chronic problem. This neighborhood has been a chronic problem. It's everywhere, so is there a way, and I know it's a big ask because the bandwidth with the PD, I know they have a lot of other things going on as well, but is there a contribution that they can make through selective enforcement in that area? Fly the colors, as we used to say.
I could set the message board back up on the upper side of Flag Hill also
Again,
tomorrow now.
Great suggestion. I don't think there's a single simple fix, but
Unfortunately, all that does is people coming down North Street, there's no room at the bottom of North Street off of Route 2 to put a message board, so it's only gonna get the south traffic. But
and I'll
I can put
even
that
go
back
as
out
far
tomorrow.
as in terms of safety. I appreciate the difficulty in even conducting a traffic stop in that area when it comes to officer safety, because there's no shoulder, so there's very little room for an officer between the traffic and the stop. So I know there's a lot of problems, and I think we have to find a solution to address the concern, but I don't think it's as simple as, like we said, we don't want to exacerbate the problem by putting in a fix that we already know doesn't work. But if we're going to have that conversation, and I'd be happy to have those conversations with the residents if the board needs a contact, or if you need to contact somebody to support.
I definitely think it'd be helpful. We've met with the residents
Yep,
numerous times.
and
Happy to.
I'm happy to meet with them
So
all again.
Of course. But I think having a representative of the board with us, in the past, Selectman Benbury walked it with us. So it was
Yeah.
helpful. It was his neighborhood, but
I absolutely understand the concern.
right.
I've lived it. I've tried to do my part
Mhm.
before. I get it. So I don't, what I don't want, I guess the key takeaway is I don't want the residents to feel like they're not being heard and we're not
Agreed.
wanting to do something
Agreed.
that's going to fix it.
So my takeaways, obviously, we're going to continue to work on getting the Complete Streets engineering work up and running so that you all can make that award hopefully in the coming weeks, and we can get that work scheduled this summer. And then you are asking for that traffic count data that we reviewed before, as well as the survey data that Glenn was talking about that Mariah collected. And your next meeting, I'm assuming you want that for? Okay.
Yes, please.
And in the meantime, Glenn's going to be putting out the warning sign again at the base of Flag Hill. And we'll schedule time with the chief and follow up with the residents, and I'll copy Selectman Loy.
If you're willing.
I put myself out there, so
Okay.
it wouldn't be nice of me to say no.
Okay.
So are you looking for like a community get-together walkthrough before your next meeting or after you, after you see the data in the survey?
Well, I'm going to put, if it's appropriate to do so, Brian, I'd like to reach out to the residents directly.
Absolutely. Please.
Just, and if you're listening tonight, among the thousands of viewers, I really would like to have a deep and thoughtful conversation. Maybe we'll start off with an individual conversation just so we truly understand. I mean, it's pretty laid out. It's a well-written letter expressing the concerns, very articulate. But I also, I want to truly have the conversation, and then maybe at the next step, and I doubt there'll be time before the next meeting to
Right.
assemble a community
Mm-hmm.
of neighbors and
Right.
department heads. And,
I mean, my only suggestion is if you could get that data to Jim before he starts meeting with residents, so he has the knowledge.
The traffic data
refresher.
we have readily available, so we'll send that right over. The
Yep.
survey data, just because it was a transition in that staff position.
I'm not
I
sure
seem
where to find
get-
it.
I know it's in a online account, because it was an online, like a survey
Survey Monkey or
tool
something,
that
or,
the residents completed. So I just need to make sure I've got the right password.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, I need to wait for IT to give me access to that.
Got it.
So we can grab that.
I just figure if you had that as part of your
no,
walk
it
around
would be
information.
helpful. Yes,
And
If
then-
not, I'll work with what I have in front
Yeah,
of me.
and then we'll take all that information plus what he gets as individual meetings as part of the next conversation.
Perfect.
I have zero concern that both of you saying the data showed that it made the problem worse. I'm comfortable going
It
forward
moved
with
it to a
that,
new
but-
location.
I think that's a little more articulate. There are some residents who are okay with the experience and they wouldn't mind it back. There were others who seemed supportive and wanted to see it happen, and as soon as they experienced it, relayed back to us that their lived experience with it was actually worse than they imagined. So they were not looking to have it back in front of their homes again. If it got shifted somewhere else, maybe they'd be open to that, but not in front of their homes.
Well, I was just going to comment. One of the thoughts that I was having was, there's multiple solutions. Just put up one in front of 13 North, right? That's just put one there. That's where the request came from. But the study showed that leading up to that speed bump and after the speed bump, so every house from the Route 2 intersection to 13 and probably from the Swamp Road Bridge or Church Street Bridge to 13, that little section, instead of being, 45 or 50 when it should be 25, is now 60, 65 because they're frustrated,
insane.
right? Which is
Right.
not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to increase it for others. And you
Right.
can't put one every 100 yards, it's just,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. It's not feasible. So
Right.
my concern is by, those that liked the speed bumps in front of them also push the problem to their neighbors on either side of the speed bump. Those that had the speed bumps in front of them that didn't like them and had them taken away were so there's like, it
Right.
just moves the pocket of where the problem exists.
Right.
So if we were to say, yes, let's put one in front of 13, are the neighbors from both sides of that going to say the increased speed is even worse now? Now, town, you have to address what you just created 100 yards away and 100 yards away. And on the flip side of that, the neighbors right next to 13, are they also in agreement that they want that put in there? Do they want to hear the rumble strip being driven over day in and day out? Do the people at 11 and 15 and across the street at 12 and 14 also, are they in agreement with this resident at 13? There's a lot of complexity about where we decide to put it in and why.
And that's what we were hoping the Complete Streets engineering, those
Right.
meetings that would have to come out of that work would allow the residents to get feedback on.
Right.
So if the engineers come back and say, based on these constraints and based on these concerns, here's the different applications that we can try, here's the trade-offs of every one of these, then the residents could give feedback on what that experience is or what they're concerned about that experience is.
Right.
If we just do it ourselves, we tried the pilot. I think we were hoping it was more successful than maybe it turned out to be. The concern is we will end up with a situation that has made it worse for some when we were just trying to improve the situation.
Yeah, it's cyclical. We just keep chasing our tail
Yeah.
about removing the problem and now addressing the new problem. And how do we do that? And I'm not saying that we don't ultimately end up putting one up, because I don't know if we will or not. It's the request just came to us this evening and for this meeting, and there's a little bit of legwork to do in between now and that decision. But
Right.
it's a little more complex than just that a resident is fearful that kids will run out on the road, so therefore we have to put up the speed bump. There are more factors than just that. Well, if that were the case, we would have a speed bump every 50 yards, and that road would be
Untravelable.
yeah, and as the primary cut through between the two towns, and not only that, but our residents that live on that street, I'm not sure that's a viable option.
No, I don't.
So,
Okay.
just got to play with all the variables.
Yeah, if that will,
I can send you information tonight.
okay, thank you.
I'm happy to join you too if you would like in
I
any of those
appreciate that.
walkthroughs.
No, that'd be great. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, anything else on that topic or are we exhausted?
I am good with that one.
I think that was it for Glenn.
That was it for Glenn, unless you want to hang around the rest
I'm
of the
happy to
plan.
hang around. It's Monday night.
Get out of here. Go home.
Thank you, Glenn. All right. Well, where are you? This section of the packet, you want to tackle the appointment of representatives to the Franklin County Regional Planning Board and the
Sure.
alternate representative of the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee.
Could it get any longer?
You said it once, I'll say it again when I make the appointment. Thank you, Brian, for bringing this up. I know now that we actually have a town planner again, this is, I'm sure it's
Well,
being
he's
received
ready
by
to
you.
go and attend. He just
Yes.
needs the official.
Perfect. Then I will make a motion to appoint Glenn Johnson Masad as representative to the Franklin County Regional Planning Board and the alternate representative to the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee, effective April 28th, 2025, with a term ending June 30th, 2025.
I will second that. Any other discussion?
None.
Seems like the motion and the agenda item were discussion in themselves.
Perfect.
I believe
Yeah.
so.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you to Glenn for taking that on.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Amen. All right. Let's see, I think we've discussed regarding scheduling a potential town meeting, formally address it to say, yes, I think we need to, and we should.
And there were, I think, one or two other topics I threw on to your memo.
It's the tax abatement options for the
Yep.
veterans.
I still today have not received
Yeah,
that official
that's
opinion.
and so just to be clear, the recommendation from the assessor's office and the Board of Assessors is the impact that it would have based on the language within the various options we have for,
Right.
I think it was section C or B, or I forget the actual breakdown within the
Right.
act itself, but there was different options that we could adopt that would have a different impact financially. And
Correct.
we were unsure that we were, I know at the time, I was reading it one way and other board members were reading it another, and I said, I'm not sure which way we should be reading this. And
And it's my understanding, based on my conversations with the principal assessor, that your interpretation at the time, the concern that the two sections together would compound each other, is a fair characterization of how they would work together. And so while you can adopt one without the other, if you adopt both, there is an implication. And so my understanding of where it's been since January, I think is when you had the conversation,
right.
is that the assessors have looked at the language. I believe that they've mocked up a draft of what the impact can be.
Okay.
And I believe that one of the assessors was taking the lead on drafting a memo outlining their thoughts on the matter and their recommendation if they have one.
Okay.
I know that Chairman Hammack had noted that he was not going to be part of that conversation as an assessor, and instead was planning to attend whatever meeting you bring this back up and speak to it as a member of the public.
Mhm.
So I don't know if they're going to make an official vote as a board of assessors, or if it will
I
just
was
be
going to say, it's only
representative.
two of them currently,
Right
and if
now,
he
a two-member board.
recuses himself, you can't have a vote of one
So that's my expectation, is that a representative will be
to talk about the memo.
correct.
That's all we're looking for. And if I recall, I was erring when I had the idea that it would compound year over year. It resets every year, if I'm not mistaken. While
Go back and
they
read.
may compound on each other, they don't compound year over. You're not beholden to that for the next year. I believe it reverts back because it's an abatement. It's not a cost that has an escalator year over year in that theory. But that's where I was asking for guidance on the recollection that I had when I was reading it.
And I don't have the data on the impact, but the other thing I'm recalling from the assessors is that in terms of abatement groups, classifications of groups,
Yep.
our veteran population is one area where that has grown,
Mm-hmm.
which is fantastic that they're using the benefit. But understanding that cost is important because you have to budget it in your overlay.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
there is a fiscal consideration. If we change something in your bylaws and adopt a statute like this, we need to make sure that we've made the corresponding adjustment in the overlay for the budget.
Yep.
So
And then also figuring out escalators year over year for growth of new veteran population that could take advantage of this, and
Agreed.
just all of those pieces.
that's what they were working
And I don't believe anybody of the three of us on the board or anybody else that's discussed it said we're not in favor of enacting it. It's we want to make sure that we have full understanding about what we're enacting and how
Exactly.
we do it,
Exactly.
so we can make the proper vote.
So now that I know that you're willing to consider a special town meeting before June 30, would you like me to reach out one more time to the assessors and see where they are with this?
Yes, please.
Okay.
At least I would.
Okay.
I think you also put something else in the memo here.
The last one was,
Oh, the stabilization.
so when we had discussed it through the budget season, I was recalling that DOR didn't like with that. We tried to do everything in one
At
motion
once.
before. I've since had a conversation with the town accountant, and it's her belief that because the funds are currently certified, they're available for appropriation, that if there was a vote to appropriate prior to June 30, and the voters approved it, the money could be held in, the terminology is escaping me at the moment, but basically it has already been approved, therefore it doesn't have to go back to retained earnings as an uncertified balance, and instead can be held for an appropriation, almost like an encumbrance. So I want to double check that.
It's like, oh,
Oh, something to that effect.
Yeah.
So I want to double check that with council to make
Yeah,
sure that
okay.
that's his interpretation. So if both come back in agreement on that, is that something, again, now that you're willing to consider a special town meeting, would you want to do that now while you have certified balances, or would you want to wait until November or December, the next time you have certified balances?
I think the only reason we were going to hold off is the fear that we were going to do all the work and get it done and get it voted on, and then have DOR say, that doesn't work, that doesn't
Exactly.
fly. And
Right.
then we're coming back to either another special or an annual next year to redo the work that was just did.
Right.
But if you're confident that DOR can get back to us and the
We'll
language
verify with
says
them.
you can go ahead and do that, there's a mechanism for you to do that now, and we're already calling on STM, I see no reason why
Okay.
we don't just get it done and get it available for us to use in that manner.
Then I will work on researching that. Excellent. That was
I
it.
think that touches on all the bullet points, right?
That
Dan?
was all of them.
Bylaw, management, bridge.
There are a stack of meeting minutes in there too, and I think
Yep, no, I was gonna say we're at the bottom of the list, and because I have this sudden fear about forgetting to go back to the bottom once we get to the top, let's tackle review and approval of the treasury warrant,
good catch.
section 16B AP.
Motion to approve the 21st accounts payable warrant for fiscal year 25 in the aggregate amount of $577,477.71 as presented, and to approve the 22nd accounts payable warrant for fiscal year 2025 in the aggregate amount of $158,925.93 as presented.
I will second that motion. Any discussion?
Done.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now let's get back up to the top.
Do we also
Re-
have the payroll warrant? No.
The chairman was just informing you of
That
the
he
actions.
signed it.
Yep,
Yeah.
that he did, under his authority, sign it. So I believe that is satisfied, so we can move
Okay,
to
yep.
back up to the top, approval of meeting minutes.
If you're so inclined, I did not have any issue with any of them. If you would like one motion,
I had zero concerns as well, and I will accept a single motion for all three.
make a motion to approve meeting minutes from March 10th, 2025, March 17th, 2025, and April 7th, 2025, as written.
Second, any discussion?
None?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so I believe that leaves us with discussion and potential vote to accept Mass Development Grant for the IP Mill site.
Yes, gentlemen.
Which is section 7A.
Yes.
No,
No.
that is
No, that-
asset management.
Sorry, 8A.
8A, sorry about my apologies. So, yes, this, Brian, you sent us a memo regarding this.
So if you recall, back last summer, you spent most of the summer working with capital planning and finance to refine your selective demolition proposal to Mass Development. And when you finally got everything situated and submitted,
They said no.
they didn't say no. They said they weren't ready to proceed. They wanted to reflect on it. Their big concern is that and it's the concern that you all discuss at this table. $600,000 is not enough to do the
Correct.
scale of the work that needs to be done. So its use needs to be as strategic and effective as possible. Otherwise, it's potentially using funds that could benefit another community and not achieving the goal, which is redevelopment of the site. That's the whole
Correct.
purpose of the fund. And so the solution that Mass Development presented, I want to say it was December, was the response we got, was that they were going to offer the town professional consulting services to specifically study everything that we've done to date, all of the literature that exists on the property, plus our selective demolition options that we considered and what we proposed. I'm sure they're also going to take into account 2025 and the market as it exists today in Western Mass, and then make a recommendation or recommendations on what the next steps need to be. If that aligns with our selective recommendations on how to use that money for demolition, it sounded like Mass Development would be open to it. If it had a different path using those funds, that Mass Development would want to have that conversation with you all. That's my understanding of how this goes forward. What this is a proposal from Mass Development. It's very similar to the other two that we've done with them, where they are looking to formalize a grant arrangement with the town in the amount of 50,000.
500, is that
Yes.
the total cost for the project cost?
Under the term section?
Yeah, under
in
the
section
four-
1A.
Yeah, I was just looking at the 4 tasks that were in the
Yep.
project language, which includes the alternative task 5.
Right.
And that's, but I have to go back to their language and make sure they put it in the same way.
The language has been in all of our grant agreements with them that if the property is sold and redeveloped for a profit, that we owe up to what we borrowed or received from the grant funds. That was true in the brownfields funding. So I'm not, the terms that are in here, I'm not surprised by. This is what we've agreed to in the past.
So, yeah, I was just going to give the quick summary for those listening is Mass Development is willing to pay $50,500 in a grant to us to hire, is it the company, whoever it is.
It's in the appendix. I'll
Yeah,
grab the
it is.
firm.
It's irrelevant for the comment now. But they're willing to
R&D
pay for that
consultants.
to get a third independent party's
Mhm.
view on the best use of the $600,000 grant for that satisfies Mass Development's desire to see the property redeveloped.
Yes.
And then we can take those recommendations and see how well they align with ours. If they align, fine, we move forward. If not, and we're unwilling to do those recommendations, then at that point, we're probably saying, find another community, take the 600.
Right. I mean, we applied for the funding so many years ago
Yeah.
because this has gone on for quite some period of time, trying to find the best strategy forward. The full demolition was $4 million.
Yeah.
And so they have been working right alongside us this entire time to try to make sure that the funding that they were providing, the $600,000, could be as beneficial to the town of Erving as possible.
Yeah.
But they do have to.
And I get their point because
Yeah.
the last time we talked about it, it was there was no end game of what's the next step after we use the 600,000.
Right.
For what purpose did that do? That did, were we going to re-advertise it for a bid for a new, purchase? Was there additional funding set aside from the town to match that to demolish more of the buildings? There was no.
Right.
We just said we're strapped for funds. We're going to use the 600 and demolish what we can, and we'll see where we stand afterwards. And
Right.
that's when they said, I don't think so. Not
Well,
gonna happen.
and if you're on selective demolition versus complete demolition, and I know we spent a lot of time discussing the merits of either one of those over
Right.
the last few years. From a selective demolition standpoint, the building you take down may or may not be the building that would have justified a selective reuse of a section.
Right.
So if the end game is to demolish the whole thing, well, then it doesn't matter. You would want to maximize the impact of the money that you have at the time. But if you are selectively demoing in the hopes of selling it, because somebody may want to reuse what's left, knowing specifically what building has the greatest reuse
Sure.
potential to access tax
We-
credits and all of that.
We put our best guess in there, but we're not the engineers and the people in this game. So if somebody
is
else is
why.
willing to fund the effort to make sure that we have an
Right.
independent third party that looks at it, I say we accept the $50,500 grant. We let them do that work and come back to us, and
Right.
I don't see an issue with it. It's no cost.
No.
The obligations, I looked through the contract, the obligations on the town are to, basically take their take their recommendations and
Right.
there's no physical responsibility that we do anything with it other than review it and
Right.
match it up and see if it aligns with our vision
Right.
and a projected use that we want for the 600,000.
Right.
And there's no financial responsibility for us to do anything while they do their work.
Correct.
So I don't see any downside in letting them do it.
Okay.
We are stewards of taxpayers' money, and the state is on a greater scale, and this, to me, sounds like the responsible thing to do on behalf of the taxpayers of the Commonwealth, not just the town of Irving. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this as well, and we'll think optimistically that R&D consultants will come up with a great vision that none of us have seen yet. And
Let's hope.
if the worst case scenarios, we sell it for a profit and we give them their $50,500 back to put into the coffers, great. I don't see
Helps the next town.
the downside.
Agreed.
Do you need a motion?
So I think
What you
we
said
need-
earlier sounded like a motion.
I think we need the motion that you're accepting this, and it looks like we need you to identify a signatory.
That's what I was wondering. Since you're here, you're going to be it.
You got it.
So I'm going to make a motion that we accept a grant amount awarded by through the Commonwealth Site Readiness Program, Technical Assistance Grant, an agreement between Town of Irving and the Massachusetts Development Finance Agency, the amount of $50,500 for, give me 1 second. I'm going to keep it generalized. Various tasks related to the IP mill and potential selective demolition, and authorize Town Administrator Brian Smith to sign any and all required documents.
Second. Any other conversation? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So as you're preparing to adjourn, can I run two things past you?
If I say no?
You're the chair, so you can say no.
What,
Your,
please?
your next meeting date.
Yes.
Tentatively, I left it as Monday the 12th. Sometimes you've held that date and then met right before the annual town meeting on that Wednesday. I don't know if that's your plan, or if you would prefer just to have a meeting, a short, brief meeting, very focused, right before the town meeting.
My 2 cents is leave it on there for now, and I would allow Jake, as the
Okay.
chair, to work with you as he's setting the agenda. If he needs more time than just a half an hour or 40 minutes before the
Okay.
ATM, then to just keep it.
So keep it for now.
If we find out, come the Friday before, well, we have to post on Thursday, so, earlier, the week before, if we
Right.
find out the week of the 5th that there really is nothing needed that's paramount to its standalone meeting, then let's just use the 14th.
Okay,
I mean, but he can make that judgment call. He does it all the time.
Agreed.
fair enough. Okay. And then the very last thing, just to make you aware of, we are starting the hazard mitigation planning process. It's going to take the balance of the year. Town planner and Chief Wonka have met with our FRCOG team to do the kickoff. They are asking you all to establish a review committee for this process. A little more formal than we did the last time. And so for your next meeting, we will likely have some recommendations of what positions or individuals you would like on it. I don't know how large of a group you're willing to think of. It sounds like we're looking for at least 7 members. Most of them are town officials, but there's obviously some key community members that we probably should be identifying. But the greater community may want to be part of this process. We have to demonstrate, my understanding, more public participation. And so I don't know that it always has to be that they are members of the committee itself. Instead, it could be just multiple interactive sessions with members of the public in a substantive manner. So I just wanted to provide you that update, provide you that premise that at your next meeting, we're going to be asking for your help identifying that committee structure. So over the next 2 weeks, if you have specific either individuals or entities, or if there's a message you want me to put out to the greater public, an invitation for people to put letters forward, happy to do whatever you would want.
One clarifying question
Yep.
is, because we haven't formalized that level of committee before,
Right.
it's a review and recommend
Correct.
committee. It is
The
not
plan comes to you all
Okay.
for,
just making sure there wasn't a delineation between how it gets voted in.
unless Chief heard it differently, my understanding is it's a recommendation to you all that this is the final plan. That's how I recall us doing it the last time. You all hold a
review,
hearing,
input, recommendations,
and you
then
vote it
send
in.
off. Okay,
And then that's what we submit to MEMA and FEMA.
sounds good.
Okay. That was it.
I got nothing.
So there was a question, I don't know if there was an answer from us about soliciting letters of interest.
I raise it only that we will have to have that conversation in the next few weeks. If you have an immediate reaction to that, I'm happy to take guidance today, but
I am in favor of soliciting that interest, and I would love to see appropriate stakeholders step forward,
Okay.
you know, for different parts of the community as well as the general public, anybody that has an interest in
okay.
what we need to do.
And they'll have to be public meetings, so even if people are not on the
Absolutely.
committee, they can be in attendance to
Absolutely.
give.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I know there was a requirement for at least 2 public informational sessions where the townspeople could voice their opinion on, what we identified.
yeah. So everybody has a voice. It's
Yeah.
just whether or not there's a voice on how to craft the recommended language in a memo to us, or if it's officially, or if it's unofficially as take my 2 cents and when you're crafting your letter to the select board. So either way, everybody gets their voice heard, which is good.
Of course.
So when
Okay.
time and bandwidth allows, yes, please
You got it.
facilitate that.
That was it.
That's all I got.
Any other business? I have none.
Motion to
Okay.
adjourn.
Second,
That was at 8:16.
16. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Aye.
Ah,
All in favor.
All in favor? I apologize. I may